So I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you from
Truly my
all
pleasure.
of us. This is wonderful to have you here. So given that this is a career conference and the vast majority of us are students, the first question I'd like to ask is, how did SIPA prepare you for your career that has followed since?
Such a great question. So first, it's truly terrific to be here with all of you today. And it's great just looking around the room and seeing what a diverse room it is. Folks apparently from many different backgrounds, which is absolutely fantastic. So as Jay noted, I was at double masters. I was a business school and SIPA student. And it was really interesting to see what SIPA brought in a very unique way. From the business school, there was a focus on management and organizational responsibility. And I'll talk about that in a moment. At SIPA was, here's the global world. Here are the factors that shape that world, the economics, the geopolitics, the cultures. Every culture is different and the values of that culture is different. And frankly, the student body. It was a really meaningful opportunity for me. I'm a New Yorker. New York is a pretty diverse city. It's an amazing place. You meet people from all different backgrounds, but you don't necessarily get to know them in the way that one could do at SIPA. And I'll share one quick anecdote, which says in a very practical way what I got, a specific thing out of my career in SIPA. So I was in international security policy concentration. And at the time, a professor told me about the White House Fellows Program, David Nissen. I don't know if he's still, shout out to David. And I kind of looked at him and said, I'm not sure government service is for me. It was a few years later, after I'd graduated, and my parents came. My dad came to the US as a refugee. All my grandparents came trying to rebuild their lives that had been destroyed in the Holocaust. And they brought us up to be deeply grateful to have a chance to practice a faith without fear and in the US. And it was a time of the war in Iraq and a time of challenges for us, for people in Iraq. And I reached out to David and said, you know what, that program you told me about? I'd love to apply. Would you write a letter of recommendation? And he said yes. So in a very practical way, not only did SIPA, I think, provide the opportunity to learn and meet great people, it also in very practical ways gave me that first step into government, which has been the last 15 years of my time in government.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
And so I have a second question here before I open up to the audience. You mentioned diversity, and within cyber, that can be a very big challenge. And so are there any initiatives that you have put into effect to broaden the diversity within cyber, especially within, given your background and being an Orthodox Jew? I think that that would be something that's very, very near and dear to your heart.
It's such a great question. So there are, I think the last stat was 350,000 open cyber jobs in the United States. Massive opportunity. And as you know, whether in government or companies, what people value is hands-on skills, whether those are compliance skills, network management skills, risk assessment skills. So I think what's so cool about cyber is you don't necessarily need a college degree. There's all kinds of certification programs where you can show you've acquired a skill and then build them up over time as one builds a career in a specific career field. So some of the most interesting programs have really been government programs that are focused on vocational colleges with state and local programs to say folks who may not be able to do a 4-year college, there's certainly jobs in that way, but who can take an accelerated degree, get into the workforce and learn the skills that way. Or frankly, there are certificate programs that various companies like Google or Microsoft offer, which folks can do online and then apply for jobs, like on LinkedIn, that match those certificate programs. So it's a really cool opportunity for folks who, for whatever reason, can't do a formal training, they're working already, they're supporting a family, they can't take a break, to also get the skills to enter the workforce. So I think there's just a ton of opportunity there.
Thank you, thank you. I would like to open up to the audience if anyone has any questions. We have Meg and Cullen who will have mics in just a second. Do we have any questions in the audience? You, sir.
Good evening.
Good
Great
evening.
to have you here.
It's great to be here.
What is your biggest challenge at the White House National Security Council?
That's such a great question. Honestly, my greatest challenge is we have critical infrastructure in the United States, whether pipelines or water or energy systems, were built at a time where they were not built necessarily for the threats we understand today. We're digitally connecting that infrastructure, sensors on the electricity grid, sensors on pipelines in order to determine whether there's a stoppage of some way or content, et cetera. All of those sensors introduce tremendous opportunity, right? The data coming off that can allow for better energy balancing of the grid, better understanding of where water may not be as pure as it needs to be, but it also introduces risk. And ensuring that as we digitize our critical infrastructure, we're addressing the security and privacy risks is a big part of where I spend my time. So in the last 2 years, and I would note that we are well behind our peer countries in setting those minimum cybersecurity measures and having that approach. We've made significant progress in the last 2 years. For the first time, the US government has set minimum cybersecurity measures for critical companies in key sectors. Pipelines, rail, aviation will be coming out later this month. Water will be coming out in the next few weeks. And that's critical because we're saying that if you're a critical provider of services, not everyone, those serving large numbers of Americans, those transporting hazardous materials, we cannot leave your cybersecurity posture to chance. We need to know what it is because we can't afford a disruption of services.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question.
Do we have a follow-up?
If not, I know you have a long list.
I do. Actually.
Thank you. I have a question. What's been your favorite moment so far at the White House?
That's a great question. And I'll answer with 2 related favorite moments. And they were deeply, profoundly meaningful to me. I mentioned my dad came as a refugee from communist Hungary, and my grandparents were, in different ways, Holocaust survivors. My grandmother had a number on her arm from Auschwitz. The president hosted a Hanukkah party this year, and I asked my parents if they wanted to come. And of course, my mom said my father did, my father said my mom did, but they came. And the president and Dr. Biden dedicated the first permanent menorah to the White House collection. They'd always borrowed one from a synagogue, and spoke about the tapestry of Jewish life as part of American life. And the original, and spoke about how there's not tolerance of diversity in this country, there's a recognition that that's who we are. And after the event, as I drove my parents back to the train station, my father said to me, "You can't understand, as a person born in America, what that evening meant to me." He said, "I grew up in a country where I got beat up on the way to school just for being a Jew. And here I'm invited to the White House. The president talks about it." So that was one night. The next night, the president hosted a holiday party for senior staff and cabinet officials. And my husband and I were there, and they brought in the Air Force Choir. And the Air Force Choir sang a lovely Christmas carol, and then they sang a Hanukkah song. And they didn't need to. Nobody asked them to. But it was part of the message of we're celebrating multiple holidays. And that, to me, is what makes America who we are. We have a journey. We're not finished that journey. But the sense that that's valued, and for me, especially with my family history, I can never, ever take it for granted, as I know most folks in this room may feel the same way. Many folks may feel the same way. So both were profoundly meaningful to me as a professional, to be working on a team where that is the way of operating, and as a person, given so many things. So not necessarily a work experience per se.
Anyone else? We have a...
Hi, thanks so much. I also want to pick on what you had mentioned about the cybersecurity and the minimum standards, but also is one of the things is besides that, one of the also problems is the capacity building of education of people, why cyber is important and why that, and also was interested in whether the council is also working on any education initiatives for high schoolers and others about training about the cyber, because most of the cyber glimpses what people think and where they get in trouble is by the clicking on the links. And I always get troubled by so many people who know better, who tell you to click on the link. And so I'm just wondering, what are you really doing on really training and making sure that companies train their people, and that is not something that they lax on, or saying, oh, well, we do education, but it needs to be a lot more work.
So you raise a fantastic question, and there's really two parts to what you said. One part is certainly the education of folks knowing what are good practices. The second really is building more secure tech. Because the truth is, somebody clicking a wrong link shouldn't be able to allow an adversary into the system, right? Tech needs to be built more secure and defensively. And there are a few things we've done. The president's executive order said the US government will own, we try to use our power of IT, right, of procurement. We buy billions of dollars in IT every year. So it said the US government will only buy tech that meets particular standards, right? Our goal was to kind of lift that up for everyone, because we buy so much tech and everybody uses the same tech today. Similarly, it was by going out and talking a lot about implementing multi-factor authentication across the federal government, which also means that a password's not enough, right? Passwords are gone. And we've been trying to work to that point, a final one, on efforts like an Internet of Things labeling effort, so consumers can see if something is secure as part of incentivizing building more secure tech. On the education side, the Department of Education has a bunch of different education programs. State and local governments have education. SISA, you may have seen SISA, stopransomware.gov, and other related efforts. Welcome ideas about things we should do, because we know that for too many people, it feels like cybersecurity is hard. Instead of saying, folks, you're empowered, here are some of the things you need to do. But I can't emphasize enough how much ensuring tech is built more secure is a part of it. It's not fair to expect people to be defending against insecure tech.
So I want to follow up on that. It seems
Sure.
like you're referencing the executive order from last year.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that didn't make it into that executive order that you think would be very helpful going forward?
It's such a great question. So that executive order was focused on federal government cybersecurity. It was focused on standing up the cyber equivalent of an NTSB, a National Transportation Safety Board. So after a major incident, we try to learn from it. Using government procurement to raise the lift-up tech. The key piece it didn't talk about was really two things. One is, how do we improve the cybersecurity of critical infrastructure, oil, gas, et cetera? And how do we ensure that new tech that's built is secure by design? Instead, what we've been doing on the critical infrastructure piece is sector-by-sector directives to kind of leverage existing regulations. So EPA is the regulator for water. We're adding cybersecurity to that. DOE is the regulator for power. We're adding cybersecurity to that. So that was the approach we used there. On an executive order for emerging systems, we did one on digital assets, cryptocurrencies. There's one that started the government's move to post-quantum cryptography. So we've taken a tech-by-tech approach rather, to your point, than a broad executive order approach for new tech, because it's felt like each approach has to be a bit different. But we're thinking about, is there a broader approach, like for connected vehicles or connected infrastructure, that where an EO would be appropriate?
I see. And to follow that up, the executive branch is not, monarchy. You have checks and balances, and so is there anything that you think the legislature could be doing to help you advance this cause of making America more secure?
Absolutely. So as we did a review of sector by sector existing regulatory structure, we found some sectors that have none. There's no way to mandate cybersecurity measures. Sectors are critical manufacturing, education are two examples. Food and agriculture is another one. So that's where we'll be going to the Hill to say, we need your help to ensure that critical services in those sectors can be protected as well.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions in the audience? Ma'am? It's coming.
Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
I'd like to know your opinion about fake news and the political use of misinformation and the role of the cybersecurity to fight them.
It's a really good question, and I think you may have seen, so I'll take a step back for a moment. Clearly, disinformation is something that as a society we have to be concerned about, right? Social media information that's inflammatory, that's false, that drives divisions in a society as a country. What makes us who we are from many one is the many talking and engaging and hearing and learning from each other. And that's often not helped from the most incendiary material that's pushed to us in platforms because it drives more clicks. So I think what you've seen first in a number of countries is trying to educate populations of, before you forward something, check. Is it likely to be accurate? Before you do a mass forward, pause for a second. What's our role as humans in trying to, make our social media, make our discourse more respectful? The second piece of it is social media platforms accountability, right? The revenue model fundamentally is driven by more clicks, and we're humans, we all know. Emotions drive more clicks, right? So, and protecting children, for example, ensuring that content that's not appropriate for kids is not served to kids. There's a lot that needs to be done. The European Union is taking steps on this in both two acts, a Digital Markets Act and a Digital Services Act, to put in place more accountability, for example, for social media platforms to share algorithms so researchers can look at them to see what they're promoting. The state of California has put in place stricter rules for the kind of content children can see. And it's a classic example of where the president's position has been that Section 230 protections are too black and white, and they need to really be refined so that there's more standards of what's reasonable and what's not in terms of the role of social media platforms.
Can we dig a little bit further into Section 230 and maybe what the president would like to see that transform into in 2023 or going forward?
So I think that's a great example, to your point, of looking to the hill, obviously, right? And I think at a high level, what we're looking for is more platforms accountability for content that's pushed, for the accuracy of content that's pushed, for what's pushed to children, for how vulnerable populations are protected online. But there's a lot of detail below that, because you have to balance freedom of speech with those aspects as well. And that's why it needs detailed legislative work to get right.
I understand. It's unfortunate that it doesn't seem like we can figure out any common ground when it comes to updating Section 230, but
there is a Supreme Court case that I would encourage folks to watch for. It's a very interesting case that the Supreme Court just took. It involves an American citizen, a young woman, who was killed in a terror attack in France. And the lawsuit was, I believe, by her parents against, I believe, Google for the algorithms that promoted terrorist content. It's interesting because it's making the case to say free speech is speech. Algorithmic selected and promoted content is a role the social media platforms are playing in what speech we see. E.g., it's not free speech. So it's a very interesting court case that I would encourage folks to watch.
Yes, ma'am.
Ask me non-cyber questions and more around, since there are so many students in the room, I'd be happy to, I'm happy to talk cyber forever, of course.
Hi, yeah, sorry, maybe for the benefit of some of the students and recent alumni, you mentioned the United States is making very significant strides in cyber policy, and this is relatively recent. So for those looking to maybe contribute to that, what are some of the organizations or pathways that you might recommend that they take a look at?
There's so many different opportunities. That's such a fantastic question. If folks are interested, the intelligence community does work in understanding adversaries and criminals, activities in cyber, whether that's intelligence collection, whether that's potential capabilities to disrupt or degrade critical services. So folks who are interested in that kind of work. Certainly, there's a lot of interesting work in sector lead agencies, water, power, electricity. If that's your interest, how do you secure these massive interconnected systems as a country? They bring risks to each other. There's years of experience, decades of experience, thinking about how a hurricane in one city doesn't bring down the entire national grid. We need the equivalent thinking in cyber and understanding what that resilience looks like from a national grid perspective. Fascinating work happening at agencies, fascinating work happening at the Department of Energy's national labs, for example, as well. Really interesting work in law enforcement. If you look at the role that ransomware and criminals are playing, fascinating, right? They just disrupted mail services in the UK, recently a major children's hospital in Canada, and our traditional deterrence mechanisms of finding and arresting folks often don't work if people are in Russia, right? Where many of the criminals unfortunately are. The way funds move, which is fundamentally what ransomware is, fundamentally cryptocurrency, how do we improve the security of that system? We've done a lot. For example, sanctioning one of the key mixers that was used by the DPRK to move hundreds of millions of illicitly garnered funds. So there's a lot that can be done in that space. And for folks, whether you love tech, you love the law, you love compliance, you love big picture policy, there's roles for everyone in that.
And for our last question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And then my name is Sohyun Lee, and I'm a SIPA MIA student. And actually, my family also came from the communism country. You just mentioned DPRK. I'm from DPRK, actually. I'm a first generation of the North Korean defector. And so my question, the final question, is going to be really personal question that, so I want to just know, out of the pure curiosity, how much the US government care and have the resources to obtain accurate information and respond to the cyber attack and cyber crimes of North Korea these days?
So I think I understood your question. How is the US government, I missed a word in there.
Oh, so basically how much US care about the cyber attacks and cyber crimes of the North Korea, and do the government has the accurate resources and the information to respond it?
It's a really interesting question. So, many folks, I know this was surprising to me, wouldn't expect that a country like as isolated as the DPRK would have as capable offensive cyber teams as they do. But hacking is a source of funds for the regime, which is a heavily sanctioned regime. And in fact, a number of the largest hacks of crypto infrastructure that we've seen in the last few years were attributed to DPRK units. We care a great deal about that, not only us, many of our allies in the Indo-Pacific and around the world, because that source of funds is a source of funds for the DPRK's missile program. And we've seen this year, more launches, almost 68 I think was the last number, than had occurred in a number of prior years accumulated. We care very much. I mentioned one of the things we had done was trace the way the DPRK was moving funds, identified the roles of these cryptocurrency mixers who mix licit and illicit funds and help launder on what's a public blockchain. And we've designated the first ever of a mixer, Tornado.cash, to do so. In addition, there have been various cyber actors who've been indicted. There's various sensitive partnership efforts we're doing around the world. And we also stood up it's called the International Counter-Ransomware Effort, with 37 countries to partner on things like know your customer rules for crypto, et cetera. So it is a very high priority for us for the reasons you noted.
Okay, so in going through your background, I actually happened to notice that we were both at Fort Meade at the same time for a little while. And time and time again, I've actually been talking to many of my peers, and it seems like there's a really big misconception on what NSA's actual role is within the government. And you mentioned intelligence collection earlier as a possible pathway for many students. So can you give us a 30,000-foot view of what NSA's mission is and what differentiates NSA from, let's say, US Cyber Command or the CIA?
Absolutely. You'll have to tell me where you were in Fort Meade at some point when we're not on mics.
Absolutely.
Deal. So NSA is one of multiple intelligence agencies in the US government. NSA focuses on signals intelligence, information on your computer, on your phone, in airwaves via signals, and for identifying foreign adversaries, threats against the US and allies and partners around the world. NSA also, interestingly enough, since the 50s, builds a cryptography, the keys and codes that protects the nation's most sensitive systems. Think nuclear command and control, weapon systems. When the US and allies conduct military operations, a plane communicating to a ship, that cryptography is built and deployed by the National Security Agency. Cyber Command has offensive cyber capabilities and is responsible for the cybersecurity of DoD and the massive DoD network, DoD itself as well as the services. And that's really the distinction. But there's a very close partnership. The director of NSA is also the commander of Cyber Command to bring those two missions as linked up as possible within each of their distinct authorities.
Thank you. And lastly, I want to ask, you've been doing this for a while, and you've done a lot of talks like this, and I'm sure you've had hundreds of questions that have asked you an array of things. But is there something that we as cyber professionals or future cyber professionals may not be paying attention to that we should be?
I'll answer the question, but I would add one thing, which is a frequent question I get that I thought, given this is a group of students, I might share as well.
Please.
So first, as cyber professionals, I think the diversity of backgrounds and experiences. So it's helpful to spend some time in the private sector, spend some time in government. If you're doing something technical, try to do a tour where you work closely with a lawyer, right? It's a field where the different disciplines really are needed to be interrelated. When folks ask me what's some of the most interesting work in cyber, I say translating the text of US law, often built for prior time, to today. I'll never forget, years ago, we were working on a domestic cybersecurity effort for critical infrastructure, and I learned the Fourth Amendment and how it had evolved from the time it was written to the way it's implemented in systems today. The piece to that I would add, which reflecting, over, yes, that was a long time, to Jay's point, since I graduated SIPA and GSB. Reflecting on that, it really was, our careers, had somebody asked me to plan my career, I probably wouldn't have been able to, because opportunities come up as you get to know people and as you're open to your point, the tough jobs, the jobs others may not want, but if you're asked to take them on, step up and take them, because they're often not only the most personally fulfilling, but they're also career building as well, because you're going to meet the other people who are just ready to take on something meaningful no matter how hard, and not only do they become people you're privileged to work with, they become lifelong friends, because there's that group of folks who are not deterred by something that seems too hard or a problem that seems unsolvable. They kind of go, yeah, that's where I want to be. And those are the kind of people that it's always a privilege to get to know and to be inspired by. So I think more than anything else, not planning, but being open to opportunities and taking those that others may not want, but really seeing where you can make a mission impact is probably the biggest takeaway I've learned along the years.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to speak with
My
us.
pleasure.
We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Great questions. Thank you. Great questions.